If you walk through the hollowed halls of the Louvre Museum in Paris, you'll see a lot of incredible things. But there's one object that is profoundly out of place. It's a massive slab of sandstone, a map of the ancient Egyptian sky, and it was literally torn from the ceiling of a temple almost 3,000 miles away. This is the Dendera Zodiac, and its story is one of the most unbelievable heists in the history of archaeology.
So, the big question is, how in the world did a huge piece of a sacred temple ceiling get here? Now, this wasn't some simple purchase or a diplomatic gift. Oh no. This is a story that's got everything: spies, secret tools, bitter rivalries, and an absolutely insane high-stakes race against time. So let's get right into it.
You have to understand, back in the early 19th century, this kind of thing wasn't really seen as theft. For a guy like Sébastien Louis Saulnier, the mastermind behind this whole plot, it was a rescue mission. He called the Zodiac an inappreciable monument, basically priceless. And in his mind, it had to be saved from what he saw as the decay of Egypt and brought to the bosom of learned Europe for safekeeping. So what's the big deal with the Dendera Zodiac anyway? Well, it's a planisphere, which is just a fancy word for a map of the stars showing all 12 zodiac constellations. Now, there were other even bigger zodiacs in Egypt, but this one was special. It was circular, it was carved in beautiful relief, and it was in almost perfect condition. No damage from time, no damage from people. It was, you could say, the perfect target.
Okay, let's set the scene. It's Egypt in the 1820s. After Napoleon's campaigns, the floodgates had opened. The country's ruler, Muhammad Ali, was letting Europeans come in, and it turned into a total free-for-all. You had agents, explorers, and treasure hunters just swarming the Nile Valley, all fighting each other to grab these incredible relics for their own countries. It was like the Wild West, but for antiquities.
Now, at the heart of this whole thing, you've got two main guys. In Paris, you have the mastermind, Sébastien Louis Saulnier. He's an antiquarian official who becomes completely obsessed with getting his hands on the Zodiac. But he needs a man on the ground, right? And he finds him in his friend Jean-Baptiste Lorrain, a true adventurer who heard this crazy plan and, instead of running away, volunteered to lead the mission himself.
Saulnier was smart. He knew you couldn't just show up in Egypt and buy the tools you'd need for a job like this. So, back in Paris, they forged a secret toolkit. We're talking custom-made saws designed to cut through 3-foot-thick stone, massive jacks to lift it, even a specially designed sledge to move it. And get this, they even packed gunpowder, just in case they needed to do a little mining.
So Lorrain shows up in Egypt, armed with his secret tools and an official permit from the ruler. But he immediately walks right into a snake pit of jealousy and suspicion. Every other European out there was a competitor, and if word got out about what he was really up to, the whole mission was toast. Secrecy was everything. The two biggest players in this game, the two top dogs, were the British and French consuls general, Henry Salt and Bernardino Trevedi. These guys were bitter rivals who had pretty much carved up all of Egypt's archaeological sites between them. The Nile River was literally the border of their territories. And here comes Lorrain, this independent operator. He was a threat to both of them. And you can bet they were watching his every move.
And the threat was very real. As Lorrain is heading up the Nile, he spots a guy on his own boat who just doesn't fit in. He's not a sailor. Lorrain confronts him, and sure enough, the guy admits he was hired by a rival to spy on him and report back. Lorrain just kicks him off the boat. The message couldn't be clearer. He was being watched.
After months of travel, dodging rivals and spies, Lorrain finally makes it to the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. And now, the real work. The truly impossible work was about to begin. How do you cut a multi-ton monument out of a solid stone ceiling? Well, you do it with sheer brute force. It took 22 days of non-stop back-breaking labor. They were sawing through solid stone to free a single slab that weighed an estimated 60,000 pounds. And they did all of this while working in the blistering Egyptian sun in 40-degree Celsius heat. That's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The conditions were so brutal that Lorrain actually collapsed with a fever and had to keep directing the work while he was sick, totally convinced he was going to die before he finished the job. But against all odds, they did it. The Zodiac was finally cut free. You'd think that's the end of it, right? Nope. Getting it out of the temple and down to the river was a whole new nightmare. The escape was on, and it was going to be just as dangerous as the heist itself. The struggle was just staggering. It took 16 days.
16 days for 50 men to drag this giant slab just a few hundred yards to their boat on the Nile. The sledge they had so carefully built cracked under the weight. The men were exhausted, but they just kept going, inch by painful inch.
So the Zodiac is finally on the boat. Lauren must have felt this huge wave of relief, but the danger was far from over. His rivals hadn't just been sitting around. They were about to make their move. Just as they set sail, another boat pulls up and stops them. On board is an agent working for the British consul, Henry Salt, and he's waving an official order telling Lower Lane he can't remove the Zodiac. But Lower Lane didn't even blink. He basically told the guy he was acting under direct orders from the Pasha himself, and if anyone tried to stop him, he'd raise the French flag and defend his property. It was a complete and total bluff, and it worked. The agent backed down, and Lower Lane sailed away. So after this whole year-long ordeal, the Dendera Zodiac finally makes it to France in 1821. And immediately, it's treated like a national treasure, a huge win for French courage and science. But its arrival also kicks off a massive debate that, believe me, is still going on today. Saulnier, the mastermind, knew he had to control the story. So he immediately published this book, the official account, framing the whole thing as a heroic mission to preserve culture. It was PR genius. The story worked, King Louis XVIII bought the Zodiac, and it eventually found its permanent home in the Louvre, where it's been ever since.
And that leaves us with a big, essential question, doesn't it? Was this a heroic act to save a priceless artifact, like Saulnier claimed, or was it just a brazen, monumental theft by a colonial power? The truth, as it usually is complicated.
The Zodiac's unbelievable trip from that temple ceiling in Egypt to a museum floor in Paris is a story that really forces us to ask some tough questions. Questions about who owns history, who owns heritage, and what the real legacy of our greatest museums is. Its physical journey might be over, but its story, that story is still being written.